Alright, hey guys. So this past June, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this, a lot of my followers, a lot of people who follow my Plant-Based Cyclist Facebook page are aware that this past June I was in a race, something called the Race Across America. It's a bike race that goes from Oceanside, California to Annapolis, Maryland, cross-country bike race. I just published 2 videos on my YouTube channel highlighting our road trip from Oxford, Ohio to Oceanside, and then the actual race from Oceanside to Annapolis. And you can see them here and here. And I'll also link them in the description. I wanted to make a different kind of video than those, explaining how we did it, going into more detail, describing in depth the finer points and the sort of the whole experience. Our strategy. Now there were many different strategies from team to team. Now to explain, there were solo divisions, there were solo riders who did the whole 3,000 miles by themselves, and they had, I think, 12 days to do it. The teams of 2, 4, and 8, we only had 8 days to do it. 9 days, I'm sorry, 9 days. So here's what we did. We decided to split up our team of 4 riders into 2 teams of 2. Dustin and I would trade off at every 10 to 30 minutes, and then once we were done with either our 12-hour shift or around 200 miles, we would meet our other team of 2, Lisa and Nelson, and trade off with them, and they would get going down the road. And then we would slam some carbohydrates and get to bed for about 5, 6, 7 hours, and then we would meet Lisa and Nelson up the road around 200 miles and take over for them. Why did we do the 12-hour or 200-mile shifts? We thought that this was the best way to ensure adequate rest. We had heard of other teams doing 8-hour shifts or 6-hour shifts or even 4-hour shifts. But we thought that trading off every, let's say the average for Dustin and I was about, I would say, 20 minutes from coast to coast. We averaged about 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off for a total of 12 hours. And we did it, we felt really good. So that worked out really well. We did the 12-hour to balance the riding and the resting. It ensured that we got as much sleep as we possibly could. Moving on to my training, being an athlete since I was 5 years old helped out a lot. I've always been athletic, so that helped me with this monumental task. Being a recreational and competitive cyclist for 12 years also helped. I've been riding my bike seriously since I was in about 10th grade. I started riding on the indoor trainer in November of 2014, and that was about 4 or 5 hours a week, and up until March. For second week of March, I went to Myrtle Beach.
Just got back from spring break, Myrtle Beach.
First outdoor ride of the season, I'll call it, in Myrtle Beach, and I rode 200 miles there. And then, unfortunately, the place I live at, Western New York, on the southern tier, the weather's awful. And it was really cold and really snowy well into March.
Hey, it's 32 degrees in Alfred, New York, the 15th of March.
Hey, it's Sunday, March 29th, 7 o'clock in the morning. It's about between 5 and 10 degrees above zero right now. Really cold. This is probably the coldest I've ever ridden in. And even into early April.
Hey guys, it's Easter Sunday.
April and May for me were really big months. So I think I rode about 1,600 or 1,700 miles in May. And the weather in May was actually beautiful. I think there were only 2 or 3 days where it rained. So that was my training in a nutshell. What did I eat? Well, I guess I can show you this too, guys. What did I eat? So being on a plant-based diet, calories were a big deal. So, like I said, our shift, Dustin and I's shift ended. We rode from 6 a.m. to about 6 p.m. And the reason for that was our other teammate, Lisa, didn't do well in the heat. She preferred to ride at night when it was cooler. And we said, sure, that's fine with us. So we were done. We could kind of keep our circadian rhythm for the whole race. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, eat dinner, and get to bed at around 9 or 10 o'clock. My dinners consisted of either a lot of rice or a lot of whole wheat spaghetti with some pasta sauce. I didn't really care too much about salt or fat, really, for that matter. I knew I needed to get in a lot of carbohydrates. While riding, I will admit without hesitation, hey, stop it! I will admit without hesitation that my health and the foods that I ate while riding were not incredibly healthy. But because my focus was simply on getting calories and keeping the energy up, it didn't really make that big of a difference to me. It didn't really stress me out. Wasn't a big deal. So the main foods that I ate my homemade granola bars, which I'll post a link to the description in the description below of my homemade granola bars, and I'll try to make a different video, a better video, because it's a little bit lame. Homemade granola bars, which are oat-based with a maple syrup and a honey sweetener. Munchies. If you don't know what munchies are a pretty awful food for you. It's a combination of Cheetos, Sun Chips, Doritos, and Roll Gold pretzels. But and I was just craving salt, and they were really good. Fig Newtons and Nutella. Big old dab of Nutella on a Fig Newton. Pop 3 or 4 of those when I'm off the bike for 15 or 20 minutes. Really good. Those kept me going. Those were a big motivation. And then like pretzels. I had PB&J sandwiches. Peanut butter and jelly on bagels, Nutella on bagels, Gatorade, lots of Gatorade, and lots of water. I did not eat my share of fruits and vegetables during the race across America because I was shooting for caloric density, not necessarily nutrient density. But now that the race has ended, I don't buy that stuff anymore, so I won't eat it. Another thing I drank a lot of was I drank about a 12-pack of Coke along the way. For those of you who are into endurance athletics and you guys go out for bike rides or runs, bike rides of 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, Gatorade's great. Coke and soda is like rocket fuel. It is just sugar, goes straight to your muscles, and it does work. So that was my nutrition. I would say one note on nutrition, I do remember this now, is that after the first day, my body let me know that this was not food that I regularly ate because I didn't really have digestive issues. On the second day, when we were passing through northern Arizona, Utah, and into Colorado, I might have pooped like 5 times. So things were moving around because my body wasn't used to them. But after that, it got a lot better. So again, not saying it was health food. I would not recommend it to anyone eating it on a regular basis. But when you're riding 100 to 120 miles a day and burning in the neighborhood of 5 to 8,000 calories a day, a lot of the times the calories don't matter. Let me pull up. There we go. So, some struggles, problems, bumps in the road. This was a rookie RAAM for everyone. No riders on our team and no crew members on our team had ever done this before. So, it would have been great if we had someone on the team who had at least done it once to turn to and say, hey, what did you guys do? Because there were so many questions and so many important questions that we didn't want to get wrong, that we wish that we had someone with experience. But I will say that in the days leading up to the race across America, we had several team meetings, and they were pretty much the only team meetings that we had, because really that was the only time that our team was in one spot at the same time. We all read the rules, and previous to that, we came to the table with questions, concerns, and comments about the race, and we thought about things very reasonably and came to conclusions like this. Okay, this is what we're going to do. We had a question or a concern. We had 3 different ideas of how to solve that problem, and we basically took a vote and we said we think this is the most reasonable way of solving this problem. Let's go with that. So we did very well. Issues with the RV and getting us to the hotel. So when Dustin and I got done with our shift, we would meet Lisa and Nelson. For example, I'll show you this map here, and I'll go over this with more detail. For example, Dustin and I, let's see, this is, where's Flagstaff? There's Flagstaff. So Dustin and I switched out in Flagstaff with Lisa and Nelson. So Dustin and I rode, I think, from Congress, boop, 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 up here to Flagstaff. We met the RV in Flagstaff. So now what the RV and some of the crew members' jobs were to get us fed and get us to the hotel ASAP, as soon as possible, so that we could just put our feet up, literally put our feet up, eat, and then get to bed. I mean, we were sitting in the parking lot in Flagstaff for like an hour and a half. Way too long. I mean, it is what it is. Could it have been better? Absolutely. And if you're watching this and you're going to be doing RAAM in the future, if you're a crew member or a crew chief, that's something you have to put as a #1 priority. Your #1 priority is the riders and getting them rested and to the hotel and off their feet as soon as possible. Another issue was my bike broke somewhere. I think it was in the middle of Kansas. Again, Dustin and I had just done a switch. Someone had put my bike on the bike rack incorrectly, and as we were pulling out of the parking lot, the bike fell off the rack. One wheel was latched in, the other one wasn't, and so the front end of the bike fell off the rack and was being dragged on the ground. Luckily, we weren't going very fast, but the bummer is my frame cracked, and I needed to borrow another rider's bike for the remainder of the race across America. So it could have been a lot worse. It could have been like I had no bike to use and I had to buy a bike at a local bike shop. But I had a bike, and I just actually filed. I just got an insurance claim check today in the mail for the replacement of that frame. So it could have been a lot worse. And if you guys also weren't aware, I've been going through a lot of bike issues lately, it seems. I broke another bike in early May on a training ride when I ran into a deer. And you can see that video right here. And I'll put it in the description below. And then the last thing too was just lack of sleep. Everyone was sleep deprived. I could say we, the riders, were almost getting more sleep than some of the crew members, partly out of they were discombobulated and a little bit, there wasn't a whole lot of focus or organization. But the crew worked hard, we worked really hard, and I might have averaged 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night after riding 120 miles, and that wasn't really that fun. Okay, part 3 here. There were so many puzzle pieces to the race across America. There's so many things. You're just juggling 12 balls at one time, trying to keep all of them in the air at the same time. I mean, just for starters, everyone had to register for the race. It cost a lot of money. We had to rent rental cars, and we had 2 rental cars. I should say that again. We had 1 rental car. We had 1 teammate's personal vehicle we were using as a follow vehicle, and we had an RV. So we had 3 vehicles. We had to keep track of gas. For the RV, we had to keep, for all vehicles, we had to keep track of water. For the RV, we had to keep track of the gray water and wastewater, because we use the bathroom in there quite often. Hotels. Where are we getting a hotel? What time are we going to pull into this city? We had to book hotels as we were moving along through the race course. Crew. The crew had to manage not only their duties, but also their sleep cycles, which, when we reached the middle of the country, we got a lot better with that after the first couple days. Riders, we were lucky in that pretty much all we had to do was ride and eat and sleep. Now there was some friction along the way with, with some things, but that's just because everyone was new to it, new to RAAM, and we had some ideas on how we wanted to run things, and some of the teammates and the crew chief had a different idea. Food and sleep, again, it's just another ball to juggle for the crew and the racers. So in this next part here, I'm going to kind of explain as we went, and see if I can name any notable memories. So started in Oceanside, California. See if I can zoom in a little bit. Okay. Started in Oceanside, California. This section, the first 8 miles or 7 miles, was a parade route where we rode mostly on a bike path. All four teammates rode on a bike path. And then after the 8 miles, Lisa and Dustin came off. It was me and Nelson riding up until basically right here, because if one of us got a flat tire in this section, it would have been really hard for the team car, to come back and rescue us. So if one of us got a flat, then the other one could keep going. So, but luckily, no one got a flat. It was right about here at the intersection of the race course and 15, where I came off the bike and Nelson kept riding a little bit longer. Lisa and Nelson traded off for a little while, and then I believe Dustin and I took over at about this area here, and this pretty much started our 12-hour shift. We rode through Time Station 1, Lake Henshaw, and all along here, guys, it's in the low to mid 90s. It was hot. It wasn't that humid though, which is nice. Riding along here, this is all climbing. Borrego Springs is where one of the most famous descents is on the course. It's the glass elevator descent, and I have another video of the entire descent of the glass elevator, and you can find it here and also in the description. So I descended the glass elevator, and basically all through here, guys, this is all near Death Valley. I'm not exactly sure where Death Valley is, but it was several hundred feet below sea level. Hot. I mean, this was the hottest part of the day. This was about 4, 5, 6 o'clock riding through here, and it was 120 degrees in the scorching sun through the desert. I imagine, the way I describe it to people is, imagine putting your head over a toaster, and now imagine that dry heat feeling everywhere. It was hot, and I'm really glad that I had my red bandana. I packed it just in case, and it came in handy. So if you're ever doing RAAM, I highly recommend bringing a cape almost for your neck, or just throw a cotton bandana underneath your helmet and wet it every time you go out. It feels amazing. To give you an idea, I started at the top of the glass elevator with a totally wet, icy head bandana, and the glass elevator took me about 15 or 20 minutes to descend, and by the time I reached the bottom, it was bone dry. So Dustin and I traded off every 10 minutes through the desert. We got to Brawley, and we kept going, trading off, and this was all at nighttime. We got to Blythe, and we traded with Lisa and Nelson. So they got all the way to Congress, and I remember, so Congress, Prescott, we made it to Flagstaff. So through here, I remember we made it to Sedona. Sedona was a memory because it was really pretty. I think Dustin, my teammate, had hiked in Sedona or near Flagstaff a couple years previous to this, and said it was gorgeous, and it was. It was very mountainous, and we were riding in this valley you see here. Very pretty, and climbing all the way up to Flagstaff. And then Lisa and Nelson took over in Flagstaff, going to Tuba City, Kayenta, and I remember waking up somewhere on the road between Tuba City and Kayenta. And there was a lot of discussion on where was Lisa and Nelson, and they were fading. They weren't doing that well because they had only gotten about 1 or 2 hours of sleep the previous night. So the plan was to get them in Mexican Hat, but I believe we got them just before Kayenta. So Dustin and I took over here, and we rode the rest of the way out of Arizona into Utah. And I remember Mexican Hat. This is in one of my videos. I got some footage riding in Mexican Hat. Really beautiful, just large, sort of deserty and rock formations. Really, really cool, really pretty. So we rode, I believe, all the way to. Oh man, it's hard to. So we rode from there, Cortez. Which one is this one? Durango. So we rode through Durango. Durango, I remember, was there's lots of climbing in here. There was a big descent somewhere in here, and we rode through Durango. Durango was the first time station. It was also where we served any penalties, and we didn't have any penalties. And I believe we rode to Pagosa Springs. So Pagosa Springs, Dustin and I were done. We got some food and slept, and I believe we took over a little bit before La Veda. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we took over a little bit before La Veda because I remember taking video footage really early in the morning of the pretty sunrise and mountains. And we rode La Veda, Trinidad, Kim, Colorado, and then I believe, it's hard to remember, I believe we traded off with Lisa and Nelson around Walsh, Colorado. So they rode into Kansas, and we took over for them in Pratt, because I remember another video that I made. Hey, we're in Pratt, Kansas. We're in Pratt, Kansas. Actually, I don't quite remember, but so yeah, we're finally. So interestingly, this first half of Colorado, very hilly, very mountainous because of the Colorado Rockies. The second half of Colorado, very flat, which kind of makes sense. Just think of Kansas kind of overlapping a little bit. Kansas's topography overlapping into Colorado. So very flat, pretty much from La Veda on. So got into Kansas. We had a tailwind pretty much the whole way through Kansas. We took over in Pratt. Very flat, pretty boring. Made our way, let's see, Yates Center, Fort Scott. I think we made it to Fort Scott. We definitely made it to Fort Scott. Traded off with Lisa and Nelson again. And Lisa and Nelson, I believe, made it to I remember, so Lisa and Nelson got rained on in Missouri. And I remember Dustin and I rode this section over the Mississippi, so we must have took over somewhere around Jefferson City. Missouri isn't too memorable, to be honest, because probably sleep deprivation is one. Let me check the document here. Let's see, okay. Kansas, flat with tailwind. Missouri, rolling hills. So there were some rolling hills in Missouri, and it was getting more humid as you got away from the desert. As you moved eastward, things got more muggy. The temperature went down, but the humidity went up, which I would have rather the temperature stayed the same at around mid-90s, but the humidity was down. And through Kansas, I remember particularly that it was really hot, like mid-90s to upper 90s, and muggy, and that was a hell of a day. So we get through St. Louis, and this was a weird race across America because there was a lot of detours because of flooding. around the Mississippi River. So we had to take a lot of detours. Kudos to our navigation team, our navigator and driver, for getting us around those. We took over Effingham. So Dustin and I spent the night in Bloomington. We traded off, I believe, with our team in somewhere between Greenville and Effingham. So, so at this point, halfway through the country, our team made a significant change. We thought that if Dustin and I ended our shift, let's say in Greenville, instead of getting a hotel in Greenville and then waking up and driving forward and catching back up with Lisa and Nelson up the road, as soon as we're done with our shift in Greenville, Dustin and I got in the RV and we set off immediately for where we thought Lisa and Nelson would end their 200 miles or their shift, which we thought they would end in Bloomington, and that worked out really well. So the RV ride, say to Bloomington, riding up, gave us time to chill, rehydrate, get some food in us, and just sort of wind down. So that way, when we got to Bloomington, we could just check into the hotel and go to sleep. So Bloomington was nice. Dustin and I slept pretty well, and then we traded off with them. I remember we had to go back on the race course a little bit and grab them because there was more rain in Indiana, and Dustin and I rode from Bloomington through hometown of Brookville for many of our crew members, Brookville, Indiana. And that's in my most recent RAAM video. We rode through our hometown time station of Oxford, Ohio with Lisa and Nelson. And Dustin and I kept going until, I believe we traded off somewhere, I believe it was it was between Blanchester and Chillicothe, because there was rain through here and there was another route change because there was a power line down. I remember that. So traded off there, and we drove forward to West Union. And then we traded off around West Union, and so Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia were this whole section here, this last push, very hilly, very wet. It rained the whole last day that Dustin and I rode, and that's included in the video as well. And it got cold, and we're just glad that we brought extra layers, everything we needed. And then finally, the last push into Annapolis was, was fine. As the race went on, a lot of us said that we felt stronger. We felt stronger and stronger. And so yeah, that's in a nutshell how we completed the Race Across America. I encourage anyone who's watching this, if you have any questions, if you'd like to do the Race Across America yourself or with a team, I encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions. And yeah, I think this is very possible for a team of 4 and a team of 8. Dustin and I felt so good throughout the race that we were thinking about possibly in the future doing it as a team of 2. But that won't be for quite a while. So thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.